This is HRN. This is the weekly Torah portion. My name is Brad Scott. I'm with the Wild Branch Ministry. And my portion this week with you all is the first 6 chapters, or at least part of the 6th chapter, of VAYIKRA, which is otherwise known as Leviticus, which is, over time was decided to call it the laws of the Levites, the laws of the Levites. I usually like the traditional Hebrew titles of these things, or Jewish titles of these things. It helps us, if nothing else, it helps us to know where it's at. This is a pretty good indicator here with VAYIKRA, and he called is what this word means. This word VAYIKRA, which is as a verb, is kara, kuf resh aleph, but as a noun is mikra. And a mikra is when people are called together. And it's no coincidence that this is a word that's used to express. This is probably even more closely expresses what we call, or many people call, church. Church. Because the idea of church is ekklesia, which is the Greek title of this book, ekklesia, which means the called out. And he calls. So I think it's interesting that the title of a book, and he called or called out, is something called Leviticus, which deals with these Levitical laws that are very difficult for traditional Western thinkers. Quite honestly, early years of my being a pastor, I had to struggle with the same kind of things. It just didn't resonate with me. So it was very easy to chuck those out as being, if you will, quote, done away with. That was an easy thing to do because a lot of the things that we are going to be reading about in this book, and I believe I have 2 portions in this book. One in the beginning, I'm going to end it, and I'm going to end it with my part in all this, and everything in between seems kind of bizarre to Westerners, but I'm just going to assume that through the course of time, between the things that I talk about in this book, beginning to end, and the other teachers in these Torah portions, that we're going to be revealing some things that take them out of its ritualistic religious realm and put them back into the simple little ordinary things that we do in life. Because I do not believe that we serve a Father that's like the Greek gods. He just has these silly little rituals that he has us do for no known reason. He just wants to see how loyal you are to him, to actually do something so stupid and silly as to kill animals and put them on an altar and let the smoke rise up into the heavens. There's no reason for that. He just wants to see if you'll be faithful enough to do it. In other words, he could have just as easily said, okay, I'm going to have these various things I'm going to have you do to show your loyalty to me, and one of them will be to stand on your head and gargle peanut butter. And there's no reason to stand on your head and gargle peanut butter. It's just that I figure if I tell you to do it and you do it, hey, that means you love me, man. No, I don't think that's the Father we serve. There's a reason for all of these things. And in the short time we have, we'll go through as many as we can. Let's begin with prayer. Father, blessed are you, Yahweh, our God, King of the universe, as we always say, who you did choose us from all the people to give us your Torah. And so, Father, Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Blessed are you, giver of the Torah. In his precious name, amen. Okay, brief overview of what we're going to be talking about. These basically are what we call the five Levitical offerings. That's sometimes what they're referred to. We're going to have the burnt offering. We're going to have the meal offering. We're going to have the peace offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering. I will do the best I can to get as much information out about these as I can in the time that I have with you. I'm going to suggest to you that all of these offerings, as we begin, are actually fall under the English word offering that comes from the Hebrew word Corban or Corban. Kof bet resh. Kof bet resh. which comes from that root. So the idea of all these offerings, even though there's different reasons and different nuances to every one of these, some of these are sweet savors, that the first three are going to be sweet savors unto our Father, and we're going to define what that means very quickly. And some of them are for, if we could use the word expiation, to deal with the guilt and stuff over your sin, which would be basically the last two, the sin offering and the trespass offering. But they're all designed, no matter whether it's a sweet savor, whether there's a blood involved, or there's just the field involved. Either way, our Father's desire in these things, from His point of view, is to draw us near to Him. That's the point, to get us to come to Him. And that's the main point, actually, of these offerings, to draw them near. So they're all designed to draw you near. Now I'm going to suggest to you that when these sacrifices and offerings are for restoring relationship with God, not man. There's a difference between offers of sins of ignorance or trespasses of ignorance and presumption, what the Bible calls presumption, which is expressed in Hebrew as a high hand. There's a difference between those offerings, and the Father knows. That just tells me the Father's heart is what it does for me. And that's the most important thing to me when it comes to this entity I worship called Yahweh, is that His most important title is Father. And I think the Father, even though there's some places that some people will say, well, all sin's the same. Well, no, all sin's not the same. The truth of Scripture is that man sins, whether it be something ignorant or be something presumptuous. Either way, all man sin, and the wages of sin, whether it's something ignorant or something presumptuous, it involves death. The wages of sin is death. And so therefore, but that's not saying that all sin's the same. That's why we have all these different kinds of offerings, which I'll do the best I can in the short time here. And so when you did something through ignorance, you came and gave an offering to the Father. But I'm going to suggest to you, contrary to maybe even some friends of mine, it's my belief, except for the high-handed sin, that even sins that you did against your neighbor. See, it seems that many times the sins of ignorance are against our Father, first 4 commandments. Many times you'll find that the sins that you knew about, the sins of presumption, or the sins that you knew what you were doing before you did it, are sometimes expressed in the sins against man in the last commandments of the 10 Commandments. But either way, when you did something on purpose to your neighbor, you had to reconcile things with your neighbor. That's what is being taught here. Then you come to the Father with your offering in the temple. So the idea of something that you knew about that you did on purpose, if I can use that term, then you reconcile with your brother, whether it be replace his ox or pay him back double from something you took for him, whatever the case may be. That's different in the sense that you have to pay the neighbor back. And then you go to the Father with your offering. Now, some people say that Yeshua didn't die for that sin. I disagree. I believe He did. But what He's saying is that if you reconcile yourself with me, but you didn't reconcile yourself with your neighbor, I'm not going to accept that offering. So in that sense, He didn't, if you know what I mean. But there are, of course, some things you can't bring an offering for at all. Murder and things. There's no offering for those kind of things. So what does that mean? You pay the penalty for it. Basically what it boils down to. But reading my notes there, when you did something against man, you paid restitution to man. But as we're going to see in the last chapter 6 here, that when you paid back man, you still brought an offering unto God. You still did the same thing. Okay, now, the health laws and sexual sins are meted out in the individual to keep the whole nation healthy. That's one of the reasons why we have these laws in the book of Leviticus, is because it's not just about you. It's about all of us. It's about all of the nation of His people. We are treated in the Tanakh and in the New Testament as a body. When the Father looks at Israel, he treats his people as one man. I think that's an important thing to grasp. When he sees his people, and we're going to see this later when we get to Deuteronomy, and he sees his people Israel, he sees them as one man. And so I'm going to suggest to you that when you're dealing with someone who's Jewish, Orthodox Jewish, in the land or here, who don't accept Yeshua, those kind of things, that if you start telling them about Yeshua, or if you're Christian, you're telling them about Jesus in Isaiah chapter 53, and they respond by saying, well, that's speaking of Israel. If you really talk to them about it, you're going to find out that we ought not to have a problem with this passage. Because what we're trying to say to them is that Isaiah 53 is only talking about Yeshua. It's typical Greek thinking. And Orthodox Judaism today is saying when you read Isaiah 53, it's only talking about Israel. And so you have one saying it's only talking about this, and you have the other one saying it's only talking about that, when in reality, they will tell you that the reason why this entity in Isaiah 53 is in the singular is because it's showing that all of Israel was put for one man. Well, what we're saying is we believe one man was put for all of Israel. That's ours. And if we can just get that far, instead of everybody insisting it's only this and can't even be that on every subject, because there are some subjects in which that is true. But if we can have some reconciliation if we can understand these simple things. And so I'm going to suggest to you this seemingly minute detail of all these offerings, whether it be the ones that we're talking about here in the first six chapters, or some of the others that you're going to read, some of the other Torah portions. There's a lot of minutia, there's a lot of detail, and sometimes when you read these things, you're going, oh my goodness, look at what this Creator wants us to do, and it just seems like, oh my goodness. The whole point of that is that He can show us the ramifications of our sin. What He's saying to us is, can you not see the results of what happens when you thumb your nose at me, or when you run off and rebel and do what you want to do? Can you not see the subsequent results of that? So He deliberately makes it, I believe, He deliberately makes it seem over the top, way over the top, as much as He can, in order for us to see the ramifications of our sin. The problem between the Tanakh, I think, and the New Testament is that because of our detachment from these things, we still really don't appreciate what Yeshua went through. Because the whole thing of that, all that gore and everything that probably happened on that tree was very similar to the seemingly over the top minutia of all the details of the sacrifices in the Old Testament. So we could look at that and see, can you see what we did to that man? You would think that would keep us from doing these things, so we wouldn't have to bring all this stuff. Okay, sorry, I get into all kinds of other things there, but sometimes I do that. All the things affected by sin. The calling out here that we have is, I want to take you to Mark chapter 6, verse 7, for example. Mark chapter 6, verse 7. So many things to do, so little time. The exact same phrases are used here. I just wanted to give you one example. And he called. Mark 6, verse 7. And he called unto him the 12, and began to send them forth 2 by 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits. Now, the reason I'm bringing up this passage is because they've been delivered from Egypt now. They've gone to Mount Sinai, they've been given the instructions to survive the wilderness, and now the book of Leviticus is going to be about his people that are summed up in 12 tribes in 4 camps. He's going to give the instructions for there to be cleanness in the camp in the book of Leviticus. And it begins with, and he called. And so we go to Mark chapter 6, verse 7. It says, and he called unto him the 12. And what did he do? He sent them forth 2 by 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits. That's why I wanted to bring that up. Okay, let's go to the individual offerings themselves. In Genesis chapter, our 4 olive tobs. I forgot to give you the 4 olive tobs. that show up in the book of, in this Torah portion. It's Leviticus or VAYIKRA 1 verse 8, 2 verse 14, 4 verse 17, and 4 verse 21. There's your 4 standalone olive tables. As I said so many times, you can go through those kind of yourself. The Torah portion begins in VAYIKRA 1 verses 1 and 2, and Yahweh called VAYIKRA unto Moses, spoke unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them. Now that word speak there is not amar, it's not vayumer, etc., and he said, but rather devar, word unto them, if you will, unto the children of Israel, and saying to them, if any man of you bring an offering, a Corban, unto Yahweh, you shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd, and of the flock. So once again, Corban is the word that's going to be used to describe all the offerings. Of all 5 of them, they're all an offering to draw you near unto him. These offerings are to bring us near to him in our place of worship and thanksgiving, and we're after we're already delivered from Egypt. That's an important thing. So no matter what we bring, whether it's the meat offering, the sin offering, or the mincha, the meal offering, the whole purpose of it is that we focus on the altar. So even though the offerings may change and throughout the book of Leviticus, the focus is that altar. That is the focus of every one of these. And of course, that is kind of part and parcel to the whole comments in Matthew chapter 23, that it's the altar that's the most important thing, not the offering itself. Because if you don't understand and you don't have a relationship and you don't have some intimate understanding of the importance of that altar, then the offering means nothing. I think that's what the Father meant, particularly in the book of Isaiah, when he said, I'm tired of your offerings. I'm tired of all these things that you're doing. And some people construe that to mean, well, see, he got rid of that already. He never intended for them. No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is you don't appreciate the altar. You don't appreciate what happens there, what goes on when those things are laid upon the altar. And so because if you don't appreciate the altar, then your offering doesn't mean anything. And so we need to know that as expressed by Paul in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, when he says that your bodies now, because there is not going to be a temple, now your bodies are a living sacrifice unto him. All right, moving on. The first offering is the olah, called the olah, chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. It's translated as a whole burnt offering. This is an offering that's going to be a sweet savor. It's going to involve blood, and it's going to be a wholly given life unto him. The whole idea of the olah offering is your life being wholly given to him. These are basically going to be, especially the first 3, thanksgiving offerings for acceptance because our lives are not lived wholly for him. And so the whole idea of a burnt offering is not necessarily, well, you did something wrong today, and you're going to come and you're going to atone for that, and you lay the sacrifice on the altar for that. That's really going to be seen in the sin and the trespass offerings, which I hope we get to a little bit later. This is going to be a sweet savor. This is going to something that's going to be a sweet smell in his nostrils, and it's going to be an acceptance unto him, realizing that our lives are not wholly given to him. Sweet savor, by the way, is reach nachoach. Reach nachoach. It happens to be 2 words. Reach is spirit. It's the root of the word is ruach, for spirit. And nachoach is the root of that is also the root for Noah. So you almost could say the spirit of Noah. The idea of a sweet savor is the spirit of Noah. You could almost say that. It's translated as smell. As I've said so many times, the word spirit is translated as everything from a subtle smell to a very strong wind. Here's an example where it's translated as a very subtle smell unto the nostrils. It's if you will, your spirit in harmony with him when it rises up into his nostrils. And of course, the idea of Noach is the savor part, or the rest, comfort kind of thing, to soothe So the idea is that spirit soothes the Father's anger, which is expressed by nose. In Hebrew, the word for anger is the same word for nose, af, ayin peh, because you snort and all that kind of stuff. The sweet offerings, once again, appear to express us giving all aspect of our lives unto God. It is said that there's no sin involved here, and that's probably true as far as I can see it. Okay, let's move on. I got to go through these very quickly because we're running out of time, but now we have the mincha offering in chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. This is translated as the meat offering or the meal offering. Obviously, this is one of those examples where meat and he has nothing to do with steak and ribeyes and hamburgers. It's a meal offering, and that's just because of the nature of the time of King James. Once again, as we go through these things, all the minutiae, sin in all its form, wrong, not living a life pleasing and acceptable to God, not giving yourself wholly unto Him, has ugly ramifications. It affects not only us, but it affects everybody else. The first occurrence of this meal offering, let's read it, is in chapter 2, verse 1 through 16. I'm only going to read just a little bit of it. And when any will offer a meat offering unto Yahweh, his offering shall be of fine flour, and shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense upon it. So the reason I brought that up is because this is not, there's no blood involved in this, but this is still a sweet savor that comes unto him. Now, something I wanted to mention is in Genesis. We all probably share a very good friend, my best friend, Bill Cloud. And I heard Bill teach this one year, a few years ago, and I've just kind of taken it from there. And I think we kind of do this to each other quite a bit. But his view on the mincha offering is very important. Since, I think this is important to deal with the mincha here. Because when you go back and read it, you're going to see that Cain is going to bring an offering, a mincha, unto God from the field. Now remember, the field is cursed. And so if we already took that with us, that understanding of Genesis chapter 1, 2, 3, before we went to Genesis chapter 4, context, then we would already know there's already something wrong with this. Cain's coming up with an offering from the field, and the field's cursed. And then in the next passage, it says that Abel, however, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof, meaning something, if you're going to have the fat thereof, something had to die. I know you all know this. Something had to die. But then he goes on to say, and so Yahweh had respect unto Abel's mincha. I know you've probably heard that before, but there's something I want to highlight here based upon these Levitical offerings here, since we're not going to have time to go through the rest of them. There's something I want to highlight. That these involve blood. The sin offering, because what Cain did, when you commit a sin, you bring an offering with blood. And so it's interesting to me that Cain brings the mincha offering, which is perfectly acceptable, implying that the Father already taught Cain and Abel the proper offerings and the proper way to do things. I don't have time to go into those. But Abel brings the blood when Abel didn't do anything. You see what I mean? The one that brought from the field, Cain, he disobeyed God. He doesn't bring the blood. Abel is faithful to the Father. Now, the reason why I believe he brought the blood first is because the blood removes the curse of the mincha. Both brought an offering from the ground. Both brought a mincha, which is one of the acceptable offerings, but Abel brought the blood first. But I'm going to suggest to you, not for him, but for Cain. I believe he brought the blood for his brother, for Cain. I believe Abel, if you will, is a model of that first priest, and would have been if he had lived. Of course, he didn't. And so he mediated. I believe he came and brought the blood and mediated for Cain, because Cain brought nothing but that which is cursed. And even though Abel also brought that which is cursed, he brought the blood with him. Now, because of that, I'm going to suggest to you that this is why he was a priest, and he was likened unto a priest. But see, here's the problem. All Cain had to do, I believe, just like the people in the days of Noah. Same thing in the days of the people of Noah as it is with Cain. He mediates for him, being a type of the Messiah there. All Cain had to do was kneel down on the ground and thank Abel. Thank that mediator and ask for forgiveness, beg for forgiveness for what he did. What do you think the Father would have done had he done that? What do you think the Father would have done had Cain just say, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, Father. Thank you for mediating for me. But he didn't do that. Said he got all up in arms, like all getting huffed like everybody else does, and he didn't do that. I'm going to suggest to you the same is true in the days of Noah. Yeah, Noah and his family went out and built an ark. What do you think would have happened if all those other people, or at least a significant part, or even 5 of them, or even 1 of them, would have come to Noah and said, forgive us, Father, for we have done wrong, we have done wickedness in your sight, and we have done wrong. What do you think the Father would have done? You know what he would have done. He would have forgiven them all. He would have forgiven everybody if they would have just repented and turned, but they didn't. At least it implied it didn't. There was an age full of violence and wickedness. The Father would have forgiven them. That's the Father we serve. But neither Cain did that, nor did the people in the days of Noah either. We have, very quickly, we have the peace offering in chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. Shalom is the word there. Shalom, peace offering. The whole idea is bring in an offering to make one complete with the Father. It's also a sweet savor, so this is something that rises up into his nostrils. I believe this has to do with man's desire to have his fullness from the Father unto him. The one is for his full acceptance unto the Father into what he does or she does, and the other one is to have the Father's completeness and fullness and peace and shalom. Remember, Yeshua said, I came to give you peace. Not the peace which the world has to peace, but my peace I give unto you. He brought that, and of course then we have the sin offering, which was no sweet savor, and involved blood now and guilt. And then we finally have a sham in chapter 5, verses 1 through 19, the trespass offering, which also involves blood. But then at the end of the chapter, we see that there are people who do things against their neighbor. Restore it against your neighbor first. Then it says at the end of chapter 6 that you will bring your offering unto your God. Thank you for being with us in this Torah portion. Shalom Aleichem. Yesh Yahweh. Thank you.